This is the France 24 debate. We're looking at immigration and how it's inserted itself into the French election campaign that's coming up in the month of April and May. First round in April, second round in May. And with us to talk about it is who is joining us from the University of the Sciences Po University, from Joanna Busby. You're an American student who was forced to basically sign on for another year because all you could get was an internship under the rules, the immigration rules here. Also with us from the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, Jonathan Chaloff, Craig Kapitas, senior writer at Bloomberg News, and Charles Jivanovic of the ruling UMP party. Now, when we asked viewers, would you still study in France, we got lots of reaction on Twitter. Let's see, we have one reaction here from Victorine. She says to us that better go to UK or Canada instead of France. They're not focused on the future, but in the past. Cédric said, I personally wouldn't anymore. They don't know what they're going to lose. Celok Tin on the France 24 debate Facebook page says, France's education and work system is rather complex. When a student wants to do an internship, he needs what's called in French a convention de stage, whereas in England, you don't need one. Steen says, I'm an American and I would love to go to France and study. In fact, it's one of my dreams.
So you see you have one.
That's right. And Got Some Bananas, this is on Twitter, says, they're really trying to deport foreign graduates? My plan E was to go back to France and study, but it seems it's getting extreme. Plan E, I wonder. That's the problem with Twitter. 140 characters, you don't know what plans A, B, C, and D are.
Plan E, that's extreme.
Okay. We've been talking about the debate about giving non-EU foreigners the right to stay after their graduate studies or during their graduate studies. There's also the issue of the right to vote in local elections, which suddenly popped up just a few weeks ago. The Senate, where the majority just recently switched from right to left, passing a bill doing just that. Now, the bill's expected to die a quiet death in the conservative-controlled lower house of Parliament, but it has sparked some strong words. We can hear from the French Prime Minister.
With this draft bill, the left is going down a dangerous path, throwing caution to the wind. French nationality and citizenship could lose their very meaning. All this at a time when our nation must face up to the challenges of globalization, when it must rally around its values and objectives.
Craig Kapitas, face up to the challenges of globalization. It's interesting because globalization is portrayed as cast as a threat.
Always has been here. It is a danger to the kind of to what the French think of themselves in the French way, but what's going on with this voting issue is the same thing that went on in Greece when they wanted to give voting rights to Albanians who were living in the northwest of the country who weren't really citizens, so that the PASOK party could get their votes. And you see this same kind of dance going on in the United States with many, with the so-called illegal immigrant Hispanic groups. Are they going to have the right to vote? Again, it's all election year politics. And I think it's, again, I can't say this often enough. This whole thing of Sarkozy and this party forgetting to follow through on one of their main components.
Craig, how many years have you been living in France?
21.
21 years. Charles Jivanovic, should Craig have the right to vote in local elections?
Well, for history, the right to vote has always been linked to the citizenship. So I think that if he wants to...
We're talking about local elections.
Yes, for local elections. So if he wants to vote for local election and for nationwide elections, he has to take the French citizenship. And it's the best way to be included in the French system and to gain our values.
But if you are already, if you're a dual national European as I am, okay, then there's no need.
But you can.
Yeah, what? I'm going to go through the nonsense of getting yet a fourth passport. I mean, come on, it's absurd.
But for local election, if you're a European member, you can vote.
Yeah.
At local elections. Yes. So there's no point. It's just for national elections. Yeah. And it's normal that the people who are going to be elected which are the deputies and are going to be represented by the French citizens and not by non-French citizens. It's just the true link in our history between citizenship and the right to vote.
Jonathan Chaloff, what's the trend on this?
Well, the trend, I think, as Charles said, in the countries where traditionally immigration has led to citizenship, this hasn't been an issue that has been discussed very much because it's assumed that immigrants will will naturalize and stay and cut their ties with their home country and settle. And that's really the model that you see in those countries. What you've seen in recent years is countries where that's not the case, where many immigrants have remained on long-term permits for a lifetime. You've seen that it's changed, and there are probably 4 reasons for that. The first is that not everyone who can naturalize wants to. No, some people simply prefer not to naturalize, and they may have. It may also be a way to keep them from acceding to other benefits. Not all immigrants can naturalize because some countries don't allow dual nationality. They have to renounce the other one, or there are problems with that. Immigrants who do naturalize don't have the same participation rates in elections as natives. They vote less. And one reason they vote less is because they have less familiarity. They don't have the tradition of voting. So, in a way, if you give the access to voting beforehand, you may increase what are very low participation rates in many countries. And finally, and this is especially true when immigrants make up a large part of the population, you can have local administrations where the population is not very well represented by the elected representatives because so few of the locals actually have the possibility of voting.
And by the way, the issue of not letting long-term non-EU immigrants the right to vote in local elections wasn't always the opinion of the French president. You can listen to Nicolas Sarkozy circa 2005, before he became president. At the time, he was interior minister.
I found that it is legitimate to open the debate on the right to vote in municipal elections for foreigners who have been residents for more than 10 years, who pay their taxes, and who have identification. And personally, I'm in favor of it.
What happened?
Well, he changed, apparently. Yes, he's saying that we have to open the debate, not to do this thing.
He says he was in favor of it, though, at the time.
Well, he changed his opinion, apparently.
But what happened, in your opinion?
In my opinion, what happened? I think that he was the president for 5 years and he had to handle many crises: economical crisis, financial crisis, social crisis, green crisis on the environment, and that he didn't think about this issue during the whole 5 years of this election.
In fairness, Craig Capitas, he forgot about the issue, perhaps, but so did François Mitterrand,
Today it's not a major issue.
Who promised it in 1981 and stayed in office 14 years. And
well, yeah, but there's this wonderful collision that you see in France. It's the immovable, the irresistible force meeting the immovable object. Where if you're everyone in France has this inalienable right of being a French citizen, and you're a citizen, and the Republic is there for you. That's why we don't need civil rights legislation. This is why we don't need legislation in the area we're talking about tonight. This is supposed to be a happy, harmonious, land of Rousseau. Well, it isn't. And you mark my words. Come the next election, this is going to be the point. If Fanfan Hollande and his socialists get their act together, this is going to be a point where they are going to be able to get traction against Sarkozy. His utter failure in this social activism realm.
John Busby, have you been rethinking what it means to be a citizen living in France, being as it is different from the United States?
No. I mean, I have a requirement to file income taxes as an American living overseas in order to be able to renew my passport. I vote overseas. So if anything, it has definitely brought me a step closer in understanding my duties as an American citizen and what I owe to the U.S. government. Now, in terms of living in a country where I don't have the right to vote, where I can be told to sent packing at any point in time, absolutely. There's a level of insecurity that comes with being a migrant. And most people, since they aren't migrants, don't ever think about that. And
did you think as a graduate student you would have this insecurity, as you put it?
No. I truly didn't. I mean, I know that there are places where you go. I mean, you go to China, you know you're not going to be able to get on Facebook, you're not going to do certain things. You come to France, and I studied in French schools. You know, I went to the Lycée Français overseas. So I really understood the French political system, and, you know, I had an affinity with France, so I really never thought that there would be any kind of issue at all.
Immigration topping one of the issues it's topping opinion polls, but not at the very top. In fact, a survey done at the end of last month shows that unemployment is the top issue on the minds of French voters. Immigration far behind. But Jonathan Chaloff, we know that a swing vote could be very important on this issue, and that the issue of immigration in every country seems to be crucial as you get closer to the election day.
Well, we looked at this a few years ago at what the determinants of public opinion were and how this affects people's how they vote on migration issues. It's true, as you said, that migration has dropped down the scale of concerns, but that's largely because of a severe economic crisis and widespread unemployment. What seems to really affect the way people vote on migration is what their beliefs are, not how immigration affects them individually. Quite often you have people with strong opinions about migrants who live in places with no migrants, or who are in a position where their job is unaffected by migration. Mm-hmm. So where does this come from? Well, this comes largely from the media and from a discussion. The recommendations that we made in the past were that the public discourse on migration should be as close to the facts as possible. And certainly during an election campaign, there's a bit less of that.
All right, the election campaign. Charles Ginovich.
Yes, just our policy on migration is, I think, a very balanced policy, because what we're saying basically is that migrants have both rights and duties. They have rights in France to have free health, free public education, and then they have the duties to respect our rule. It's just very simple. It's something which is very balanced. On one side you have these rights, and on the other side you have these duties, and this is the major axis of our policy.
I beg to differ. Foreign students pay higher fees when they enroll in French universities. So when you see HEC or Sciences Po, they are funding major projects and projecting the funding for major projects.
But they are private universities, HEC. But
absolutely.
In the public system, it's free.
Absolutely.
It's true.
But, you know, it is a two-way street. Mm-hmm. And in terms of, you know, access to benefits, foreigners do not have the same access to benefits, period. There is a waiting period. There are all kinds of things that are put in your way so that you do not use the social system, even if you have a right to. There are things that are put there as an obstacle. And as you said, yes, there are duties. There is a contract. Mm-hmm. And what upsets me is that I signed up for something, and a lot of foreign students signed up for something, took out loans to come here with the expectation that they would be able to work at the end of their studies for a year or two. And that changed midstream.
Because the law says 6 months, and in Germany it's 1 year after the end of your studies.
The thing is that when you are asking for a changement de statut, mm-hmm. you can only get a changement de statut for a change of status. That's only for a permanent contract. Exactly. So that's for you to be able to stay on a CDI, which means that you'd be working
a long-time contract.
Mm-hmm. That's right. So this whole 6-month thing is something that's just been pulled out of a hat. Yes, it existed, but it was so difficult to apply for and obtain that few people ever made use of it. So now it's essentially you're closing another door, mm-hmm. and then telling people that there's this other tiny little door that no one ever talks about and no one ever uses. So it's not exactly a very honest statement and argument, especially when you have French admissions officers selling their schools and the ability to work for a year, 18 months overseas. Mm-hmm. So there's some kind of issue. If you don't want foreign students to come, not a problem. But the government is going to have to be consistent, and it is going to have to step up to the plate and say, this is what's going on. Because if you don't, the internet will do it for you.
How many foreign students are we talking about here? Is there a number? I haven't seen any in any of
there's 500 cases, at least according to the association that defends them.
Every week, 100 more people email us and say that they are in a bind. Those are people who may not be able to apply what happened to me. So when the government says there are 500 people, I'm not counted in those 500 because I wasn't allowed to drop off an application. So that's all very convenient. If people can't even apply, then they don't exist, then there's no problem.
No, but my question is this: is what would be would be an estimate, but how many foreign students are there in France right now if the government wanted to, by December 31st, put in a boat and send back to wherever they're coming? What's that number?
It's not the point, it's 200,000, isn't it?
The students, I think, I'm not sure the exact number if you include Europeans and non-Europeans, but if you look at the number of students who
non-Europeans who would be...
Who stay there, it's about 13,000 now who stay in France.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. No, and
these are non-European...
These are non-EU. Okay. These are people who
so we have 13,000 people in jeopardy.
These are the students who come in every year and stay in France where they change their status when they finish their studies.
And just one final point on this, because we're almost out of time. France's aging population. Baby boomers are retiring. We're talking about the elections coming up in May. That's short term. But long term, we can look at the chart of the demographics in France, and you see that it is a population that is right now aging fast. Long term, are the doors going to reopen fast, you think?
Well, this is an issue that's affecting many OECD countries. France is demographically in a better position compared to most countries. It doesn't have the kind of urgency that exists in Germany or in the Scandinavian countries where they're at the edge of the retirement of the baby boom generation. Generally, this kind of, let's say, arriving at this demographic landmark, when the baby boom starts to retire and you have a shortage of people coming into the labor market, does lead to much more interest in labor migration. It was the main factor behind the change in policy in Sweden, for example. So you can see this. Not always. In Japan, they have an aging population and they haven't even begun to discuss this. So it's not a general rule.
So there's no hard and fast rule. We're going to have to leave it there, but I want to thank you, Jonathan Chaloff. I want to thank Charles Giedonovich. I want to thank Joanne Busby and Craig Kopidis. And thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate. Stay with us. Coming up next, it's time for Business, hosted by Marcus Carlson.